Welcome to My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 442. This program is in merit of Baruch ben Yamin ben Menucha Lana and Miriam bas Chaya Sar Altois, Yukusil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Todres ben Miriam and Sarah bas Rochel Altois. So we are in the closing days of the month of Adar. Shenichnas Adar marben besimcha. As Adar enters, we increase in joy. Entering into the month of Nisan, the new month of Nisan, which is considered Reish Chadashim, Lishan Hu L'Chashi Hashana, Chedesh Hazeh Lachem, the beginning of the lunar year, which will lead us into Pesach, the renewal of the Jewish people as a whole and as individually. So there's a lot of power and energy in these days, as explained at length in Chassidus, and our goal is to channel that energy into our lives in experiencing renewal, in experiencing joy and geula and redemption, because this month of Nisan is also called Chedesh HaGeula. So these are some of the central themes that we'll be talking about, as well as many questions that keep coming in from you, and I thank you for that. So please keep them coming. ChassidusApply.com is our website where you can submit any question. Nothing is off limits, nothing is taboo, and I will attempt to address them in a timely fashion. I have to admit that there are more questions coming in than I'm able to answer, but I guess that's a good sign. And you can also find their archives of previous programs, all the previous programs. And frankly, many questions have been addressed in one way or another. I still try to address, even if it's somewhat similar, because these issues still persist. But you can check out and easy to find topics. Firstly, every video, every program is time-stamped, which means you can go down in the description of the video and you'll see what minute that topic begins, and you just click on that and it'll take you straight to that part of the program, as well as many essays that were written over the years and other resources, Chassidus resources. So please take advantage, ChassidusApply.com. With that, we'll begin with, being that it's close to us in time, with, what shall I say, bizarrely, in this month of joy was also a day that was not so joyous, at least not le'esata, not till now. And that was 31 years ago, in the year Tafshin Nun Beis, Chof Zayin Adar, the 27th of Adar, when the Rebbe suffered a stroke, which left him speechless and also not being able to use his hand to edit the sichos, the two main faculties of the Rebbe. And that was a dark Monday. We'll talk about it more in detail. And that over a period of 2.5 years, Chof Zayin Adar, Tafshin Nun Daled, 2 years later, the Rebbe would suffer even a heavier stroke. And then Gimel Tammuz is Gimel Tammuz. So, while it's a day of joy, meaning the month of Adar's joy, we have to also address issues like this, part of what life is about, what it means for us, what its lessons are for us, and how the Rebbe would want us to approach a day like that. So we'll talk about Chof Zayin Adar. We'll also talk about Beis Nissan, which is the yahrzeit, the stalkus of Hilula of the Rebbe Rashab, as well as the beginning of the Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe's leadership, Beis Nissan Tov Reish Pei. So we're talking about 103 years ago. And as well as Parsha Vayikra, while also addressing some topics, timely topics, issues, controversial issues, some not so controversial. So we have for you quite a rich and full program. And let's go. So with that said, let's start with Chassidus applied to Chof Zayin Adar, if you can call it that. As I said, I remember that fateful Monday evening when the Rebbe was at the oil that day. And in the evening, it was clear that something was happening. The Rebbe hadn't come back yet. And then we found out the Rebbe had fallen into oil, of all places. And then the stroke, which from there on, we did not hear the Rebbe speak again. how it affected us all, how it affects us individually, is probably beyond words, but still we need to speak about it. So, a few questions that came in. Did the Rebbe give us any hints or do anything unusual before Chof Zayin Adar to allude that something was wrong? So, in overtly all the events that happened back then, I cannot say, especially as someone who's involved in remembering Chazorah, remembering the Rebbe's Farbrengens and Hanochas, Maniach, writing them down, that there were places the Rebbe hinted to and spoke about. I mean, after the fact, you go back and you find many things. I've spoken about Kisisa, Parsha Kisisa, the last Farbrengen the Rebbe actually edited, was talking about it, because summation, a sachakal of all of life. And the other sikhs that you can, as I said, in retrospect, see things. But there's one exception. 6 weeks before Chof Zayin Adar, it was Gimel Shvat, the 3rd of Shvat, and the Rebbe spoke uncharacteristically about a stroke of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and discussed the fact that at the time the doctor asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, why? Why would God strike you, of all places, in your mouth and your right hand, the two faculties that you use to connect to your Chassidim, your whole mission, speaking to them, writing to them, writing for them? The Frierdiker Rebbe did not answer that question, but the Rebbe went on to explain. I can't say he answered the question, but he explained. And Moshe Rabbeinu, the first Rebbe also, Hadibur hoye begolus. Moshe was kvad peh v'kvad loshen, aras vasayim, lo ish dvarim anechi. Difficult to speak. A man of no words. 3 different ways the Torah describes it. To the point that Moshe actually used that of trying to avoid taking on the shlichus, the mission that Hashem was giving him, that God was giving him. He was saying, I'm not a person that can speak. Why don't you choose Aaron could speak? Choose someone else. Shlach no biyat tishlach. Mashiach. And God said the classic words that still ring till this day. Mi sampel adam. Who gives man a mouth to speak? It is I. It's not your mouth. I will be my mouthpiece. That's what I want. I'm not looking for an orator, looking for someone who'll channel my words. And indeed, Moshe is the man. And interestingly, it is Moshe, the man, lo ish dvarim anechi, a man of no words, whose words we remember more than any other person in history. There's a whole sefer, Ela dvarim asher diber Moshe. These are the words of the man of lo ish dvarim. Because it wasn't his own words, it was the words of God. And it was Moshe's bittul that allowed him to be able to be that speaker. And as the Rebbe goes on to explain from Torah from Chassidus, that Moshe was in the level of machshava. Min hamayim mishisihu. Why was he called Moshe? Because from water I drew you. What is water? Water is alma diskasi, the hidden worlds of thought. Dibur is alma disgali, the revealed worlds of land. Moshe came from a different reality. And his job, his mission was to draw that reality and bridge it, interface it with the revealed reality. To bring Torah from a place that's completely beyond revelation, Chem de Gnuza, into this world, Leba Shamayim, into this earth. That's what Moshe did. That's why he was beyond words, higher than words. And yet the Golus, the Dibur Hayeh Golus also, because the Yidden were in Golus, so it affected Moshe. As the Rebbe explains. And then the Rebbe concludes and says, so when a Rebbe has a stroke and cannot speak, didn't use the word stroke, but cannot speak, everyone who heard the Rebbe's words have to become his mouthpiece to speak. At the time when the Rebbe said the talk on the 3rd of Shvat, no one knew why he's speaking about it, but 6 weeks later it became sadly quite obvious. And in that sense, we were given our mission right there. Now, why it had to happen that way, I will not be able to understand. Why couldn't it be in a revealed way? We already had, Moshe was already Yetzer, the Frierdiker Rebbe was Yetzer, but that's what happened, Chof Zayin Adar. But to say that we're left without direction and guidance, God forbid, a Rebbe Bavar and Talz, a Rebbe anticipates and gives us all the needs that we need to have. All the directives that we need to fulfill our mission in this world. And that's what the Rebbe said, be my mouthpiece. Now, if you want to go a bit deeper You can say 11 months to the day. Before that, Chof Zayin Adar was Chof Ches Nisan Tovshin Aleph, 32 years ago, where the Rebbe said the famous words, I did everything I can, tu tals v'siket, now do what you can. And tragically, that was fulfilled 11 months later. That the Rebbe literally said, I did everything, do now what you can. And we're left to be the mouthpiece. So there's some mysterious reason, or maybe not so mysterious, that we need to do something. And in this case, to be the ones that's what we should be speaking. So that's the closest thing to a hint, if you wish. But it's not about sensational hints. This is about directives. A Rebbe doesn't just tell us something. He wasn't just talking about the idea. He was telling us a directive. So let's continue. The next question was asked, what were the last words we heard publicly from the Rebbe before Chof Zayin Adar happened? And what is the significance of those words to teach us what we should be doing today? Thanks. Well, firstly, these are not the last words, but they definitely give us directive. Farbrengens continued every Shabbos, and the weekdays the Rebbe would speak very often through that month of Shvat, and then all the way, the last would be Shabbos Pasha Vayikra, 2 days before Chof Zayin Adar. There were dollars on Sunday, so you can say the Rebbe spoke there. I don't know if they call that publicly. It was individually to people, and the things we know what the Rebbe said. There's a famous line that he told the girl who said, I love you, and the Rebbe gave her $1 and said, this is for the love. You could say there's much included in those words. But in the Farbrengen of Vayikra, which was 2 days before Chof Zayin Adar, the Rebbe spoke about Achdus, Avis Yisrael. And you could see there too, speaks about some things that he usually didn't speak about, that the Rabbeim didn't go to Eretz Yisrael. And the only reason the Frierdiker Rebbe went was Kivrei Tzadikim, because he couldn't go to Russia. But Vayikra was the focus. That year, Vayikra and Pekudi were separate parshas. So it was a Iber year, it was a Shana Muberes, a leap year. So Vayikra reflects unity. If you want a clearer message, unity. What did Tzemach Tzedek say when they asked him, you're putting yourself in danger, what will happen if, God forbid, something happens to you? So he said, first of all, they're the children, and the second of all, he said, Yiboyesem, he'll answer like the Gemara answers, Yiboyesem, another thing, the Achdus of Chassidim will lead them to Mashiach. And in Tavshin Chavav, 100 years from the Tzemach Tzedek's Histalkos, Hilula, the Rebbe repeated the story and said, Heint, we don't have the children, so we have the second answer. The Achdus of Chassidim, Vayikra of Chassidim, will lead them to Mashiach, which is what the Rebbe said, not last Farbrengen. I'm sure if you read the Sichos, you could find more directives. The unity. There's many things that we can disagree about, but unity is the critical component. Disagreements can be done in a very pleasant and a very healthy way. But if it becomes personal, it becomes negative, that's a problem. Vayikra does not mean there aren't individuals. It means it's a kehillah. But there's a synergy, a unity that prevails and dominates. So that's the most immediate directive. So we have two directives already. The unity, to be the Rebbe's mouthpiece. Again, if you go through the Sichos, I mentioned Kisisa, we spoke about that previous week, 2 weeks ago, about Kisisa being the last Farbrengen the Rebbe actually edited, and there he talks about the Sachakel of Klal, Prat Klal, that you have the highest moment, Matan Torah, the first tablets, the low moment, the low point, Chet HaEgel, the distance that created, and then the reconciliation of Yom Kippur, the second Luchas, which again, of course, is a lesson of how to deal with darkness, which leads me to the next question. What lessons can we take from the occurrences of the painful years of Tafshin Nun Gimel Nun Daled? That would be 57, 53, 54. That Tafshin Nun Beis was the stroke, was Chof Zayin Adar, and then continued the next 2 years, 2.5 years, until it led to Gimel Tammuz. Obviously, we can't look for explanations on Hashem's crazy ways, or mysterious ways is the way I would phrase it. But being that these were occurrences in the life of our Nasi Adar, leader of our generation, the Rebbe, it must be that there's something deeper. And if you can give insight on your personal experiences and how it affected your life, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your devotion. It's difficult to speak about that period, which left us all quite stunned, dazed, literally at loss. We had no direction. We didn't know what to do. There was no precedent. The only precedent was the Rebbe had the heart attack. And there the end was one that the Rebbe came out stronger than ever. So that was our hope and our prayer. But exactly what to do was not that simple. But as the Rebbe always emphasized, that even when you don't understand things, and even when they're painful, that doesn't mean we lie down, God forbid, are passive, and we surrender. On the contrary, it means that then more than ever, we need to dig deeper, find greater strengths. So I can't speak for others, I can speak for myself. So being someone that worked my entire life, my entire adult life, in the Rebbe Sichos, besides the tragedy that we all suffered, also personally, my whole work orbited around the Rebbe. The Rebbe had a farbrengen, and I had a job. And suddenly, for the first time ever, what do you do now? So I had to review and revisit my mission. And that is when I realized, it didn't happen overnight. I realized that we have to take the organization, we had Vada Nochsat Mimim, the organization that published the Rebbe's words, that Chazan published the Rebbe's words, we have to continue. And we did. We couldn't obviously write a farbrengen the Rebbe didn't speak at. So we were publishing at the time Week in Review, which was an English adaptation, and we started publishing from previous years. We also started something new. I knew the Rebbe would always say, do something new, not just continue. So we started a thing called the Week Ahead. It was like a type of hayem yem for the week ahead, like a page that would go out by fax. Those days fax was the prominent way. Email was not yet existent, and the websites were really not there in 1994. So it was the beginnings. And a week ahead, which was a little short vart, a short thought, a short directive. And we did that for at least till after Gimel Tammuz. I don't remember when we stopped that. But that's when we started something new. Personally, as I said, my entire life was focused around writing farbrengens. The last farbrengen was Vayikra. After that, even though we hoped the next Shabbos would be a farbrengen, there wasn't. At least not one that we could hear. After a while, after a lot of soul searching, I realized that this is my shlichus. The Rebbe said it clearly 6 weeks earlier, before Chof Zayin Adar. That's what I did. I was a mouthpiece. I chazed the Rebbe's words. And what better way to do it than write a book? I realized, and I kept on being frustrated by the fact that people who I was teaching or meeting, or other people were teaching and meeting, they said, so give me a book. You say the Rebbe is such a genius, such a brilliant teacher. What does he teach? It's only Yiddish and Hebrew, locked up in cryptic language. Most people can't read or understand it. So it was 2 years to the day, Chof Zayin Adar, Tovshin Daled. And then came Yud Alef Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday, where I determined to get beyond all writer's block, to sit in a room for hours and hours, and I recorded the first draft of Torah Meaning for Life, which would then be published pretty quickly afterwards. Right after Gimel Tammuz, I already had a manuscript ready before Gimel Tammuz. Right after Gimel Tammuz, a contract was signed with William Morrow, a major secular publisher, and within a year later, the book was published. Tafshin Nun Hey, it came out. And ever since, that drives my mission. Continue doing exactly what I did then. Then I wrote the Sichos in Yiddish, the Rebbe's language, the way the Rebbe spoke it. Yes, in the academic or the scholarly, and with all the footnotes and annotations. And now, the time came to take those Sichos, those talks, and translate them, communicate them in an accessible and an applied way to people of all backgrounds. And that's essentially what I've been doing for 31 years. And the last time I wrote a farbrengen, back in Tafshin Nun Beis. So each of us have to find the lessons that the Rebbe directed us in being the Rebbe's arms and legs, the Rebbe's mouthpiece, carrying the Rebbe's words, his instructions, his guidance, and especially in the prime directive, which is bringing the Gula Mitzvah Shlema through Yefutza Meinesecha Chutza. In many ways, I would say this program is also an extension of that. So not only are we to not retreat or slow down what we're doing, we have to double and triple our activities. That's, in my opinion, the lesson of Chof Zayin Adar. Where do we stand with that? We could sit and debate philosophical and theological questions. Why did it have to happen? And the sad part of it, and so on. But bottom line, Ma'aser Ikar, action. What are you doing to continue perpetuating Torah Chassidus as taught by the Rebbeim and through the channel of the Rebbe? That's the question, the only question. I don't want to even elaborate more because it's very clear and direct, and there's no real way to waver from that. That is what we should be asking. That's Chof Zayin Adar in a nutshell. We do what we have to do. The Rebbe said clearly, Mashiach will come. Yefutzim enesecha chutza, osima do malka Mashiach, as Mashiach promised, Baal Shem Tov. So the only place to look at is at ourselves. What someone else is doing or not doing, that's what they need to deal with. We have to be able to stand accountable to the Rebbe and say, here's what I've done. I presented to you, I presented to God, and please do your part. And have Rachmanas already, and bring the Gula Amitis Vashlema, Shamas Begufim. And yes, where the Ma'alma Diskasi, it doesn't remain concealed, but comes in revealed in speech and in action, and a revealed Teva Nira Vanigla, in a revealed good, apparent way. The Nigla Kved Hashem V'ro Kol Basar Yachdav Kipi Hashem Dibur. That the divine glory will be revealed, that the flesh itself will see that God is speaking. Okay, so that covers Chof Zayin Adar to some extent, and hopefully Dvarim HaYetzim in Alev Nichnasim Alev, words from the heart enter the heart. Yiflu bi u'ba'ashemim, that it should affect me and all the listeners, to be able to borrow a line from the Rebbe Rashab. So that is a good segue into Beis Nissan. So 103 years ago, Beis Nissan, another sad day on one hand, but also Bo Hashemesh v'Zorach Hashemesh, the sun sets, the sun rises, the Frierdiker Rebbe became Rebbe. The classic Sikha Vayikra Tov Shem Mem Zayin, the Rebbe speaks about the connection of the month of Nisan to Nasi. We say the Nasi every day, which we'll talk about shortly. And it's a month of Nasius. It's the Hilula of the Rebbe Rashab, the beginning of the leadership of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the birthday of the Rebbe, and the 11th of Nisan. It's a month of Nasius. It's also Rosh Hashanah l'Nasiim. So there's a lot of connections to leadership. Again, as much as on one hand, when you read Ashkafta the Rebbe that Rebbe Rivkin wrote, how sad the experience of the Istalkus was, all documented in vivid detail. But again, it's all about eliciting and bringing out from us even greater strengths. Times would be very difficult. In 1920, Frierdiker Rebbe and all the Gzeiras and the decrees and the Bolsheviks and then Stalin and then the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest till he finally left Russia, the former Soviet Union. But at the end of the day, we prevailed. As the Frierdiker Rebbe told the captor, one of the Yevsektia, who will prevail? We will see who will prevail. We prevailed. The Frierdiker Rebbe did come out and rebuilt, first in Europe and then ultimately in America. And here we are, 103 years later from Tafresh Pei. Chassidus Chabad thrives, grows. A lot more to do, but no one would have ever imagined back then. So the sun did rise, and the sun continued to shine, because all the Rabbeim are one continuation. And then from the Frierdiker Rebbe to Yud Shvat Tov Shin Yud, when the Rebbe assumed leadership, Der Ashvi, and continues, as I said, our job is to perpetuate it, even stronger than ever. So someone writes, in honor of Beis Nissan, can Rabbi Jacobson please give a short summary and discuss a few innovative ideas of the Rebbe Rashab, especially in this Ayin Beis by Morim. Thank you. I'm assuming you're mentioning Ayin Beis because I do teach Ayin Beis every day, every weekday I should say. I've been doing it since 100 years of the centennial of Ayin Beis, and Tov Shin Ayin Beis. I began in Tov Shin Ayin Aleph approximately. So we're talking about 12 years, and I'm actually middle of volume 3, close to another 60 pages to go. So probably another good few months. Just as an invitation, anyone's welcome to this class. It's every morning, 9:30 New York time, Eastern time, 9:30 a.m. It's live on YouTube and on Zoom. So please join us. Go to chassidussupply.com for more details. Sundays it's 10 a.m. Goes for an hour, hour and a half. On Sunday, an hour and a half. Every day, an hour. So I have literally thousands and thousands of videos of all the classes in Ayin Beis from the beginning. Ayin Beis is clearly the magnum opus of the Rebbe Rashab, coupled with Samach Vav, but Ayin Beis is far longer, far more comprehensive. And in a nutshell, before we say Chiddush, remember the ultimate greatest Chiddush is to be able to collect and distill everything that was said till there. So the Rebbe Rashab has many Chiddushim, but overall the bottom line, punchline, especially in Ayin Beis, interface. How we create a bridge between the divine and existence, between the transcendent and the immanent, between Makif and Pnimi, between Keser and the Sfiras. That's the central theme of Ayin Beis. So what do you need thousands? It's over, I think it's over 1,550 pages. Because how you create the interface is the challenge. Because we're talking about two opposites, the divine and creation, the creator and the creation, the finite and beyond the infinite, the mortal and beyond the immortal. Bilti Mitzias Nimtza and Mitzias Nimtza. All the different antithetical elements. And yet we're finding to create a bridge without, God forbid, annihilating existence and without compromising God. And that's where you need to get through every detail, the building blocks, you can say. The stepping stones, even better. The ladder that we create between the two. And every step matters. Because if there's any crack in the ladder, crack in the stepping stones, you can't achieve that full fusion. And that's what Ayin Beis is concerned with. Really the central theme of Torah B'chlal and Kabbalah B'frat, and especially Chassidus Chabad. But in Ayin Beis it all comes together and lays it out in this fascinating way. And ultimately the ultimate connection between the lowest levels of our existence, the depths, even the darkness itself, with the highest dimensions and beyond dimensions of Etzem itself, of the core essence of Atzmus U'Mahus. Going through each step by step by step. The Rebbe Rashab in Ayin Beis does something which is not done by anyone else, actually brings from all of Chassidus. You can use Ayin Beis as a springboard to any Maimer Chassidus, because he talks about all the sugyas, and you see he deliberately does so. Brings from different Maimorim, and in my Ayin Beis I have marked up all the Maimorim that I was able to identify where he brought. We're starting from the Alter Rebbe, actually from the Magid. A big part of Ayin Beis is built on the Magid. The Alter Rebbe and through all the Rabbeim. And weaves it together in this mind-blowing tapestry, this comprehensive blueprint of interface between existence and the divine. So it's no surprise that the Rebbe Rashab was born in the year Kisra, Tafresh Chof Aleph, in the day Chof Cheshvan, everything connected to Keser. Because that was his mission, to draw down Keser, the transcendent, beyond, into the immanent, into the permeating energy of existence itself. Here's not the place to go through all the chidush of the Rebbe Rashab for sure, and even some, but that's what I would focus on. And the Yom Hilula, and the Yom Istalkus of a tzaddik, like the Alter Rebbe writes in the Geras HaKedesh, is a day when all his Aveda comes together and elevates, and then draws it down. Poel Yeshua's Bekerev Aretz. It affects salvations, Bekerev, in the depths of Aretz. That itself, Poel Yeshua. Yeshua is the level of Keser. Kerev Aretz is down below, the interface that yet again. And the second major thing was not just the teaching of it. Well, I wouldn't just call it a just, because the teaching is all about the Aveda of it, to work with it, but created an actual, lack of a better word, incubator, laboratory, a yeshiva. Temchit Mimim, which would take these ideas and bring them into practice, create soldiers. Kol HaYetzel Mechamas Beis David. Soldiers of Beis David, the house of David, to fight the war, the Ruchni is the spiritual war, against assimilation, against apathy, against indifference, and bring these deep teachings into the world around us as a active and practical, applied methodology of how to live up to our calling, to the divine mission that each of us has. Okay. Is there a story that the Rebbe Rashab let me begin to phrase it properly. Did the artist Marc Chagall visit the Rebbe Rashab? More detail, is there a story that the Rebbe Rashab invited the artist Marc Chagall to a private yeshivos to discuss with him the importance of art and music in Jewish culture and how it can be used to connect people to their spiritual roots and to inspire them to lead more meaningful and fulfilling lives? If it's true, the Rebbe Rashab said this and taught this, what can we do today to honor this teaching? Would it be appropriate for our yeshivas to have art and music classes so we can help develop talented artists in our community and inspire them to create art? So two separate questions. Let's deal with one at a time. As far as my research shows, Marc Chagall did see the Rebbe Rashab. He went to visit Lyozhne, where the Rebbe Rashab spent some time in the summer, and he went to get a bracha from him. He was traveling then. And he does come from Hasidic roots. He lived in Hasidic towns. And the Rebbe Rashab gave him a bracha. But as far as we know from Chagall's writings, they didn't discuss art. There may be other places that I have not found. If somebody has information on this, please share with me. It would be fascinating to see if the Rebbe Rashab did indeed speak to him about that. But as I said, from Chagall's notes and diary, we don't have information on that. However, we do have other things that Rebbe Rashab talked about art. We know the famous story where he went to Europe, the 3 paintings of Raphael, the lessons that he learned from it. And Chassidus in general, his letters and other places that talk about the power of art, especially the lessons we learn from Avodas Hashem from it. That's regarding Chagall. Regarding using music and art, well, these are all gifts from God. They ask anyone that has such talent should use it for that purpose. Like all things we were given. Everything God created in this world was l'chvede. And definitely skills like that. To have in a yeshiva, to teach art music classes, that you have to leave for the anholos of the yeshivas and the directives. In Tem Chitmim, that did not exist. Did they allow students to take lessons outside of the yeshiva? So there are a number of stories. The answer is yes. But that was not the main focus of the yeshiva. But at the same time, someone has a talent, they should use it. So to establish curricula in yeshivas and schools, that's up to what the directives we have from the faculties, from Rabbonim, from the Rebbe. I'm not going to weigh in on that. But that's not a contradiction. Again, there are many people who study music and art and other of the arts. And by all means, the goal is not just to express ourselves artistically, but to bring Chassidus and channel Chassidus through these skills. As a matter of fact, last year we did the contest. We included a track called the Creative Track, where people can take music and art and scripts and calligraphy or sculpture or and other embroidery and other forms of another arts to express an idea in Chassidus, apply Chassidus to life. You can do it through an essay, but there's also many other ways to do it. So that's a general answer. I'll just share one story I heard about Rabbi Eli Lipsker, Olav Shalom, one of the early Chassidic musicians in this community. So he came from Israel in 1957, I believe. And he had an artistic side to him. So he would quietly go take music lessons. The yeshiva got wind of it. Rabbi David Raskin and the faculty decided they're going to send him back to Israel. Because that's not what he came for. He came for music lessons. He came to learn Torah. But before they decided, finally they said they'll tell the Rebbe. They told the Rebbe that about him. And the Rebbe says, go to him and ask him who's paying for his music lesson. And the yeshiva should pay for his music lessons. So, noch zen nachas von hem in the Welt von Chassidische Negine. We'll see nachas from him in the world of Chassidic melodies. So Rabbi David Raskin went to Eli Lipsker and said to him, I hear that you're taking lessons. He right away realized, he's in trouble. Rabbi David Raskin said, who's paying for these lessons? He says, I don't have any money. I took some loans. He says, from now on, the yeshiva will pay. He was shocked. But you see here, And the Rebbe recognized the talent and said it has to be used. That doesn't mean we have to establish music classes in the yeshiva, in 770. But it's not a contradiction. It's two separate things. The objective and the priority and primary is learning Nigla, Chassidus, Avedis, Atfilah, and everything that leads to. But a skill, a divine skill, a divine talent is something not to be squandered. The Rebbe was very adamant that people who have that talent and are using it should use it to Kedusha. Okay. Since we're talking about the month of Nisan, one question: what is the spiritual significance, according to Chassidus, of reading the daily Nasi in the month of Nisan? So we read the Nasi because on Rosh Chodesh Nisan was the establishment of the Mishkan, and then the Nisim brought their offerings. So we reconstruct that, we recreate that. Chanukas HaMishkan in Parsha Nasi by reading every day the Nasi that brought till Pesach. So the 13 Nisim, leaders of the tribes. On Aruchas Dika level, I've referred to Vayikra, Chof Zayin, very powerful, beautiful sikha, where the Rebbe speaks about the connection of Nasius to Nisan. Of course, it's the month of Geula. The main focus is the nitzchis of the Nasi. That the idea of a Nasi is eternal, lives on. Remember, Chof Zayin was just months after the case of Hey Tevis, all about the eternity of a Nasi. That a Nasi belongs to his Chassidim. So it's not something that's just a human thing that comes and goes, God forbid. And the Rebbe elaborates on the nitzchis. It brings from the Maimer, from the first Maimer from Beis Nissan, after Beis Nissan, I should say. The Friedrich Rebbe's first Maimer is the same last Maimer the Rebbe Rashab said. The Friedrich Rebbe added a piece, a whole story, about how a Nasi lives on. Not only he lives on, but his furniture, his table, his chairs, his bookcases. The nitzchis of a Nasi. So when we say the Nasi, and then we say that we should be zeichet to have that Nasi within us be revealed and so on, is telling us that the Nasi lives on with us. It's not just remembering that which happened in the past. That we have a Moshe within each one of us, and we have the Nasi of each tribe within each one of us, the Aveda Ruchnis. So the significance of saying it is Mamshech, the inyan of Kisisa, Nasi, Nesius, Reish. Elevating, not just doing the Aveda on a basic level, but even B'chol Avavcha, B'chol Nafsha, B'chol Ma'idecha, to the point of a Nasi, to the point of a level of Isnasus, which is an exalted state, using the language of Chassidus before Keser Melech, Keser Malchus. Hisnasus, transcendence, and elevating each one of us. And what better time than the first days of Nisan, as we prepare for what? For Geula. Geula is exactly that. Medalag al harim mekapetz al gvois, a leap, Passover, Pesach, Pesach ala Pesach. We leap over the regular, the level of a Nasi, the Chatchila Ribber, that elevates us all to a higher level. Higher than we can reach on our own, with our own limited Aveda. Okay. With that, let's move to Vayikra. Chassidus applied to Vayikra. So Vayikra is the beginning of the third book, Sefer Vayikra, sometimes referred to as Leviticus. Teras Kainim, it's often called. And of course, the whole book is all about the halachas of Karbonis and Tumah V'Tara and everything that was said that day, those days, after the temple was erected, when the Mishkan was established in the end of Parsha Pekudei. So Vayikra goes on, as I discussed in previous program, all the way through Bamidbar and Nosei, and middle of Baalei Escha, the journey continues after the Shechina, the cloud rose, Vayalas Ha'onon, that's when they continue their journey in the wilderness. So really, all of Vayikra, all the way to the middle of Baalei Escha, is all about the events that happened during the time of the establishment of the Mishkan, the laws and the consecration and dedication of the temple, and the training of the Kahanim, and so on. So the lesson to us is very, very clear. We, build for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among you. And how? Adam kiyakir mekem karm la'Hashem, as Vayikra begins. Vayikra el Moshe. Hashem calls to Moshe. The etzem of Hashem calls to Moshe, as we'll discuss momentarily. and says, "One Odom ki yakriv mekem korban Hashem." As the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the Basel Legani Maimer, Tovshin Yud, and the Rebbe explains every year after that, that's the central mitzvah, korbanos, that we have to offer ourselves to be korban lashon kiruv. We're mortal human beings. We have our own self-interests. We dedicate our lives, completely commit our lives to become offerings, connecting with and becoming one, close to the divine. And what do you be makriv? Become from the nefesh habamis, from the animal soul. You're offering your animal soul, which means to transform the animal soul and all its interests towards divine service. So with that, there are a few specific questions that came in, and let's go through them. First question. Why is the alef of Vayikra written smaller than the other letters? So the alef of Vayikra is smaller, and sometimes compared to the alef in Divrei Hayamim, where Adam is written larger. So when you say something is alef zeira, a small alef, you're talking about bittel. So it's connected to another question. And that is, why doesn't it say who called Moshe? It says Vayikra al Moshe. It should say Vayikra Hashem al Moshe. Vayikra al Moshe. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Kutei Torah, because Moshe at that point was connecting to the Eibishter as he's beyond any form of description. Even Hashem is already a description. There's higher than any description. Etzem, the Etzem. And hence the small aleph, because the small aleph indicates complete bittul. Moshe at this point, after Matan Torah, and after building the Mishkan, stood in a state where he was completely absorbed by the divine, which really leads, that gives us the power. The Nasi is giving us the power to Odom ki yakriv mekem korban Hashem, to offer ourselves and also basically nullify. And that's the small aleph, the total bittul. There are other explanations as well. The Vayikra is Melosha Chiba, love. But what is love? Again, being absorbed. By Bilam it says Vayikra without an aleph. Vayikra, which is more like almost like a random thing from the word mikra, like it happened. Not necessarily an expression of love. He was a prophet, so there was a communication with him, but it wasn't with the same intimacy. So the small aleph all indicates on total absorption, total dissolving into the high reality of godliness and the etzem of elikus, which for us is the lesson that not to live a life dedicated to ourselves, but live a life, take your life and dedicate it to something greater. Become an alef zeira, the bittel of the small aleph. The Alter Rebbe once said to a person who he hired, he said, I have a mitzvah to educate my child. You have a mitzvah to be mefarnes and support your family. So let's exchange a mitzvah for a mitzvah. You will teach my child, and I will give you money. I'll help you support your family. The younger man said to the Alter Rebbe, what should I teach? And the Rebbe told the story, Yuchvat Tovshin Tazayin. He said it with a niggin. And he says, the younger man, he was intelligent. He realized he has an opportunity. What should I teach? So the Alter Rebbe, he became very serious, became very absorbed. And he would say things with a niggin. So the Alter Rebbe said to him with a niggin about an aleph. He said, the first thing you teach him is an aleph. Was is an aleph, a pintele von neben, und a pintele von unten, und a kav hamachaber. Was is an aleph, a yud von neben, a yid von unten, und a kav von Yerushalayim, was beheft sie, was bringt sie zusammen. What's an aleph? A yud above, a yud below, the Eibishter above, a yid below, and a kav of Yerushalayim, of dedication to the divine, the bittel of Yerushalayim, alef zeira. I'm adding that connects the two. So it's the ultimate way of how we bring a korban, how we connect to something greater than ourselves. What does Chassidus say? Or what is the spiritual significance of the various types of animal, grain, and incense, the temple offerings, and how do we accomplish that today? What does Chassidus say about the various different types of animal grain and incense sacrifices we are commanded to bring in the Beis Hamikdash? And what do they represent on a spiritual level? What can we do today to accomplish those same things the Karbonis would accomplish if we don't yet have a Beis Hamikdash? If we don't yet have. Some sages say that today our davening is in place of Karbonis, but is there a specific prayer attached to each different type of sacrifice, or did the sages mean prayer in general? Okay. So, Chassidus talks at length about every type of carbon. The carbon chatas, the carbon osham, the carbon eila, carbon shlamim. Each one represents another form of kiruv. Remember, we're talking about bringing ourselves closer, kiruv, carbon kiruv. And for that, you have to shed your animal desires, the animal soul, which is the animal, the behemoth that represents the animal, if it's a carbon that comes from an animal. And the other carbonas that don't come from animals, like incense, or grain, or the carbon mincha, and so on. So there, each one represents another feature in the person, another material part of ourselves, some more refined than others, that we're dedicating to the divine. Like, for example, a person uses their eyes to look at what they should be looking at. So it's not quite necessarily offering an animal and all its passions and desires, but it's also a form of offering. So Chassidus goes through each carbon and explains it. Here's not the place to go through all the details, but suffice it to say that every carbon reflects another aspect of our material lives. And, as the Arizal explains in the Kutetera of the Arizal in Vayikra, that the carbonas cover all four areas. Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber. Medaber is, of course, the person that's bringing the offering. As the Ramban says, he has to envision as if the offering is himself. There's Chai, in the case where there's an animal. Tzemeach, like Mincha Selis, whether it's flour. And Daimim, Melech, salt, and other expressions of it. So every part of our existence, and we all have all four within us, the mineral, the vegetable, the vegetation, the animal, and the human, all to be a carbon l'Hashem. So similar to what the Chared Sefer Charedim cited in a number of places, says that every mitzvah, 248 mitzvahs correspond to 248 limbs, Evarim. 365 negative mitzvahs correspond to the 365 nerves or veins or sinews. And each mitzvah elevates and refines and correspond to its corresponding part of the body. Same thing, the carbonas, each of them correspond. Chassidus brings in Kunter Sa'aveda and other places that the seir, the keves, the eis, the different types of animals represent different aspects of the animal soul. The chutzpah of the animal soul, the grubkeit, its callousness, its laziness. So each animal represents a different aspect of how the animal soul manifests itself in our lives. And when we bring the offering, we're refining and elevating Korban L'Hashem, Reich Necheich L'Hashem, where we shed the externals and the excess of the cholav and dam, the fat and the passion and the desire, and we elevate the rest to godliness. Yeah. And today, because they are all representative of ruchnistic things, we obviously have the ruch, like you said, tefillas became tamidin tiknum, or tefillas became carbonis tiknum. The tefillas are instead of those carbonis. For example, shachis and mincha is the carbon tamid twice. The tamidim, the morning prayer, is the tamid that was brought in the morning, and the tamid that was brought bein arbayim in the afternoon. Ma'ariv corresponds to trumas adesham, when they cleaned the ash, they cleaned the mizbeach, the altar, at the end of the day. Again, all brought and explained in Chassidus at length. Are there specific prayers? Yeah, we say the karbonos in the morning, we say ketores in the afternoon. So we say them all, and the intention is not just to say it, but to find the corresponding element of that in ourselves. Are different prayers like Shema, Shemoneh correspond to different karbonos? That we need more research. I don't recall actual parts of the different parts of tefillah corresponding to different karbonos, but if anybody has more information on that, please, let's make this a partnership. I'll be happy to share it with others. Finally, one more thing in Vayikra. Does it say anywhere, let's again. What is done if someone cannot afford an offering he is obligated to bring? So being that korban is something that all of us are obligated to do, that means we can't be deprived. So the Torah actually, right in Vayikra, right in the beginning, talks about if you don't have the ability to bring a certain korban, so it says to bring a one of lesser value. And if not that, to bring the minchas cheta or the other forms of korbanos that you can afford. What does that mean in Ruchnius? That everybody has to bring what they're capable of bringing. A korban osher, has to bring a korban osher. In the areas where he's capable, where he is able to do that, where the Torah says he should do that. Korbanoni is korbanoni. A korban osher is not supposed to bring a korbanoni. Someone who is able to bring more is not supposed to bring something that someone that has less. So meaning everybody, like the obligation of tzedakah, everybody has an obligation to give tzedakah, even an anya ve'evyan, even for a pauper, relative to what they have. Because everybody has that capacity. So then, does it say somewhere that if a person can't afford to bring a korban, he could fulfill his obligation by bringing a piece of wood to help start the fire on the altar? There's the concept of a korban eitzim, bringing wood, but I don't recall that it's instead of bringing a korban. It was something that was brought. It was the end of Masechta Tainus talks about it. The different tribes that brought for different days, especially when there was not enough wood. What lessons of Chassidus can we learn from this? Well, the main thing to remember is that we can learn is, as I said, everybody's capable. You have to find it on your level. Now, as far as eitzim in general, the Rebbe explains that eitzim, you could say that was itself, eitzim was also a means to an end. They used the wood to light the fire. That even when the korban itself represents a part of your animal soul, but the eitzim represent all of you, that all of you is dedicated. Because at the end of the day, you can't light a fire without wood. So the wood represents the resources and represents the ingredients of what defines who we are. And all that begins to burn. Eish tukad ala mizbeach is burning. So that just like wood itself gets consumed by the fire, the wood of our animal soul and of our entire beings gets consumed by the fire, the fiery love and passion toward the divine, toward godliness. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, the next question is something that recently has become a topic. Women halachik advisors. What is your view on women becoming yoetzot halacha? Literally loosely translated, halachic advisors. It seems that halacha has progressed over time regarding women. The halacha used to be that we don't teach women Torah, but that seems to have changed. How did that happen, and why, and under what circumstances would it be okay for women to be rabbis? Okay, so let me read a few other questions that came in on this. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. There was a letter circulating recently from the Bezdin, Crown Heights Bezdin, that basically argued that women cannot give advice to other women about halacha. The yoetzet halacha, so to speak. In the letter, the rabbis used some very condescending and derogatory language about women, including statements such as, "It is clear that one is not to rely on the words of women at all." Is this correct? How can rabbis in today's society say something so bigoted, especially where the Rebbe's view was the women should co-direct their Chabad houses? Additionally, we made so much progress regarding women. In the past, women were not allowed to learn Torah, tiflus, but today we don't agree with that. How can Lubavitcher Rabbonim say something like that? Please address this. I understand it is very controversial, but we are losing people. We need a voice of reason and sanity. And finally, another question among many, but I'll read this one as well. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I know that you try to avoid controversial topics as much as possible and try not to discuss topics that may interfere with the leadership of the community. I understand that and I respect that. However, recently the Crown Heights Bezdin published a letter where it made some incredibly questionable statements, to put it mildly. I don't know if you saw the letter, but the gist of it was that women cannot be halachic advisors because one may not rely on the words of women and are feeble-minded, etc. Do you agree with that? How can they say something so offensive and out of touch? We're already struggling with numerous people leaving the community, and to say something like this is only to alienate so many more and to make it more difficult to show that Judaism is a kind, sensitive, and godly religion. Please address this. This is perhaps one of the worst things that a reputable rabbi can say today, and yet here we are. How do you reconcile statements like this with the idea that all are children of God and that we are all equally valued by God? How can it be that rabbis who have presumably studied Torah for much of their lives to say things that are so insensitive and degrading? I understand if you don't want to publicly make a statement against the Rabbanim, but please do find a way to address this in one way or another. This is very concerning. Thank you. Okay, so I read the letters exactly as they are, with the established premise that I've mentioned many times. I think there should be a forum where people can express themselves, whether you agree or disagree with what they say, whether you think it's chutzpahdik or not. So I read it the way it is, but I will respond in kind and tell you my thoughts on this matter. No, and I'm not shying away from controversy. I never have. I shy away from sensationalism and controversy just in the name of controversy, but things that are controversial and appear so need to be addressed. But here's the key thing, and I want to give one short introduction because it addresses many, many issues today. We have many problems. We have many challenges. We have many things that actually, even Torah and mitzvahs has been abused by some people against others. But we have to separate between people doing something wrong and what the Torah says. Imreiku mikem, I quote very often from the Rebbe, who quoted this very often. If you can't find the answer in Torah, it means there's something lacking in us. Torah is given from God, and it's Torah's emes. So whatever the Torah says is absolute truth. Our job is to find what it says in Torah, translate it properly, preserving its integrity, and applying it to any given situation. But what do you do in a situation where either somebody does not find that answer in Torah, or they find people who are using Torah, and it doesn't sound necessarily that they're actually applying Torah the proper way? So there are those that say, whatever the Torah says, whatever the Rabbanim say, that's what goes. And I would agree with that totally. That's what the Rabbanim, Man Malka Rabbanim were given that power. But what happens if someone argues, but look at situations where Rabbanim are not able to address. Either they don't understand it, or they're not sensitive, or they're not competent. So then there's the other extreme that says, you know what, we don't need Rabbanim. Let's not listen to any Rabbanim. We'll create our new halachas. Or we'll go against halacha, or we will do something that applies to this situation that didn't apply earlier. Even in this letter, you write about changing things. We're changing things. No, that's not acceptable either. So the two extremes, to just blindly follow whatever it says in a place without looking at the given situation and looking to apply it to that situation, or the opposite, to go away from halachic authority, because whatever reason, let's even say it's correct that they don't understand all the situation. So who is going to understand? A secular person, or a person who doesn't know Torah. So the challenge is how do you bring these two together? How do you preserve halachic authority while also applying it to every given situation? So we have stories of Rab Chia in the Gemara and other places. They went to study by a shepherd for years in order to understand sheep. It wasn't enough to look in the book, meaning in the Sefer, in the Torah. You have to understand sheep, just like you have to understand technology, as the Rebbe writes about when radio began. Understand technology and telephone and so on before you determine, is it K'el Odom or not? Can you read the Megillah and be Yetzer on radio? So if you don't know the technology, you could think radio is maybe just a pipe. It's me speaking to you through a pipe. So you have to understand not just what the Torah says, but also the conditions. I remember when the whole Rahman al-Islam issues began with the issue of child abuse and molestation began. To talk about it. So I believe I was the first to write about it. And I remember that was the challenge. Many Rabbanim were saying, this was always ignored or was not really talked about. Let's move on. But the fact is, if anyone understands the psychological and emotional and impact of that type of trauma, knows it's not something you can just push aside. It's like murder, like the din of a reidif. So the laws of lashon hara or mesira, which means to inform, don't apply. You're dealing with someone who's running with a knife in the streets. He's a danger to others. So once you understand what abuse does, then you have to figure out, okay, so how does Allah address that? And that's the great challenge. So what is the root of the issue? Why they established, or some people have tried to establish this women advisors? I'm assuming, I didn't do research on it, that there's a situation where women felt they didn't have anyone to go to. Why didn't they go to Rabbanim? I'm not sure. Do they feel they can't, the Rabbanim don't understand them? They feel they're not sensitive enough. So one would have to look at the root. To just accuse someone that they're doing, intentions could be very good. Should this person who's coming with good intentions to help women get through different halachic, let's say, challenges or difficulties, or help advise them, not replace Rabbanim, should that not be the way? Maybe they shouldn't be called that. If they were called a mashpia, would that be acceptable? So I look at it from both angles. First of all, what is driving this? Secondly, what's the response of the Rabbanim? Yes, absolutely. I am not here in no way. Even if I disagree with the Rabbanim, you're not going to hear that from me here, because I'm not a Rav. I'm definitely not the Rav authority in Crown Heights. So if the Rabbanim paskin something, you can go to them, Mehechen Dantuni, you're allowed to ask them, where did they get this from? So that's where I'm coming from. Not to, God forbid, overrule or challenge. They wrote it. I'm sure they thought it through. I'm sure they gave it thorough thought. But you still could ask them in a respectable way. I would wonder if the Rabbanim were in touch with the women or whoever is establishing these so-called halachic advisory committees or individuals to understand where they're coming from. Is it a pure defiance and the Rabbanim feel that they've been defied against and therefore they have to take a stand? Or was a misunderstanding, or there was no communication? I have no idea, to be honest. But that's how I want to speak about this openly. I would like to believe that the Rabbanim, being responsible, have spoken behind the scenes before they gave out that letter to understand what the circumstances are, and then they felt maybe they can't get through the people, and that's where they wrote it. If they haven't, I would definitely encourage them to do that, because many of these things can be diffused without having to become so public. When you start realizing that people's intentions were good, maybe that shouldn't be the title, Yaitzus, because like a new title right away seems threatening. Where do you find the expression Yaitzus Halacha? You don't necessarily find that in Torah. Mashpia, we know that Rebbe established mashpiyim, men mashpiyim, they're women mashpiyim. What's wrong with a woman going to a woman to talk to her about matters? We're not talking about paskin halachas, but how to deal with the situation in her life. And a good mashpia will say, for this you need to go to a Rav. But we know there's a aseh l'cha Rav, knei l'cha chaver. A Rav is more of an authority. A chaver is more of a yayitz, advice, consult. So it could be sometimes it's just semantics, words. You have to get to the bottom of it. When you do it that way, without personal agendas and vendettas, and without resentments, and without misunderstandings, you usually can diffuse most issues. So I cannot say I explored it. I'm not here to mediate. As I said, Rabbanim have authority, and they have a right to establish that authority. They give sources. We have a right, anyone has a right to ask them a question, Mehechen, where did you take this from? A right to discuss this behind closed doors. And then, perhaps many of these issues would just disappear. Because I think if you understand the reason, this is not about establishing authority of women in halacha. And there's a battle that some say yes and some say no. The Rabbanim did quote sources. Sources are eternal. Even though we teach girls Torah today, but the Rebbe has a whole sikh in Emer Tavshin Lam Hem Ches, where he explains how it's not a contradiction to what was once. We're not changing things. Women were created in a divine image that doesn't need any Rishenim or Achreinim. It's a pasuk in Torah. That Zocher Nekeva Bara Esam, B'Tselem Elikim, Tzalmenu Kid Musenu. The Eibishter then split them into two, and they joined together to connect with the divine image, Tzelem Elikim. So that's a given. Nobody can overrule that. When the Gemara speaks about Daitin Kalis, or whether women are made a raw, that's already a personality thing. The Torah tells us what a woman's role is, what a man's role is. There are things that men, Avram was told to listen to Sarah. So clearly that Sarah had something to say that was valuable. And the same thing with women throughout history. Megillas Esther, as the Rebbe emphasized. The women did not participate in the Chet HaEgel. They were the first to bring the Davis donations to the Mishkan. And on and on and on. So it's a matter of roles, both divine roles. As long as we talk about the divine, this is not about human opinions here. There's some men that are probably more feeble-minded than women. It's not about feeble. That's not even the right word. You have to understand, what does das mean? Bina yaseda nitna b'isha. It says noshim daitin kalas. They have more bina, but they're weaker in das. What does das mean? This is not derogatory at all if it's presented correctly. The problem is these words become loaded, people misunderstand them. And yes, women have been hurt by men, not for good reasons, not in the name of Torah, novel b'reshus Torah as well, so that only adds to the pain. So you could imagine there's a lot of distrust, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of stereotypes, and some have legitimacy. So wise leaders, understanding the sensitivities, would address it all first behind the scenes and try to find out what's going on. How many things have happened where it could have been diffused if you did it a Torah-dik way? It wasn't done in a Torah-dik way. So the Torah people, so to speak, came and felt offended, and they came out extremely opposing that, which only became a vicious cycle of back and forth. This has been in so many different areas. And some people just say, you know what? I don't want to have to do any more with Torah and Halacha. I'm upset and so on, which is, of course, not the right way to go because, as I said, it's not the issue of the Torah. It's the people that are interpreting it or applying it. On the other hand, that Halacha is also from the word halicha, means movement, has to be applied, has to be customized. Without compromising, God forbid, the integrity of the original. So to find that place, that is the big challenge. And to do so, you have to do it wisely, sensitively, with empathy. Listen to a situation. You hear someone who speaks about how they've been hurt on Shabbos. They were abused on Shabbos. So yes, of course you can tell them, you have to keep Shabbos no matter what, obviously, but you have to also realize it's a person who's been seriously hurt, traumatized. You have to recognize that. Does that mean you have a right to break the halacha? On the other hand, we have the concept for pikuach nefesh. So all this needs to be taken into account when addressing such issues. Understanding the root of the issue, what is the best way to resolve the issue from a Torah-dik Chassidish perspective. That's my take on it. And I'm not here to defend any derogatory terms. I'm not here to criticize Rabbonim, as I want to emphasize time and again. I'm here to put things into a more broader context, which I believe, if we do that way, Torah way, will be, as to call it Torah kula lenitna lasa shalom be'elam. It came to bring harmony, peace to this world, not create conflict. If it creates conflict, we have to look at what's going on here. Not here to point fingers. I think all of us can, together, we're all in the same boat, put our heads together, put our hearts together, and figure out the right approach. So that's how you turn even a thing like this that can be controversial. Perhaps it can be turned into something positive, and also address other issues out there that are similar, where there's a real problem, people are hurting, the rabbis are not addressing it properly necessarily, or either they don't know or they're not yet familiar. On the other hand, to go the other extreme, not to follow rabbis and halacha, no. Just like we spoke about when we talked about psychedelics and we talked about plant medicine. You need doctors, not quacks, and not pseudo-doctors. You need real doctors. But doctors have to also be flexible and open to alternative methods. We're talking about the medicine area. And you need that combination. Same idea, not quite like we talk about halacha, but halacha is also a factor. To know how to address a situation that may be one that is more of an emergency situation or a medicinal situation that needs healing. Not talking about for spiritual reasons, but also the combination, and with common sense and little bittul and humility and for the common good. I have no doubt that's what Torah was given for. It was given by Hashem to us and gave us Enim V'akashel Lefikechon, gave us also the ability, the wisdom and intelligence how to take Torah and apply it to every given situation in life, especially through the lens of Chassidus. Okay. So there's more to talk about, but time has expired for this class. So I'm going to stop here and conclude with a bracha that should be a very geula dika, simcha dika, Chodesh Adar going into Chodesh Nisan, nismar geula. And yes, all any setbacks, any darkness, Chof Zayin Adar should be transformed to even greater light. That's the whole point of Purim, of Adar, Chodesh Asher nepach, v'napachu, complete transformation, and then the darkness even leads to even greater light. Yisur ne'er min ha'cheshach, should be only light, only light, and only geula, marching to B'Nissan Nigalu, B'Nissan Asidin Goyal, that this month, even before the month begins, should be the geula amitis v'ashlema, especially through our work of Yefutzu Ma'nesecha Chutza, which Mashiach said is the way to bring us imar da malka Mashiach. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. ChassidusSupply.com is the place to pose any questions. I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your comments, your critique. Everyone have a good week. a Simchadik week and a Geuladik week.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.